are both working from home, managing, things at home. So it'll be interesting to hear perspectives on what some of these challenges are, what some of the opportunities are for women working from home. So looking forward to like a good discussion. Just a little bit on logistics. I'm going to give a quick introduction about IvyCamp Ventures and IvyCamp for those who are not familiar, and then briefly introduce our panelists and have a good, interesting discussion with them, and then I will open it up to questions. So I'm hoping to get some really good questions from our attendees and looking forward to what our panelists have to say. So welcome again, everybody. A little bit of background. IvyCamp Ventures was founded by Vikram Gupta in 2011. And our goal was to leverage our global alumni ecosystem to both foster entrepreneurship in India and to identify, high growth businesses, entrepreneurs with a high potential that could be market leaders and support them. And our fund is guided by a very entrepreneur-centric investment approach, focusing on high quality entrepreneurs from our premier educational institutions of the country. And what we believe is that for success, and especially for early stage and growth companies, it's very important to have a collaborative approach. And we have set up a very unique mentor model to bring, the requisite skills, network, passion to support our entrepreneurs. And to this end, in 2015, we have launched IvyCamp, which I drive, which was intended to be the first innovation and entrepreneurship platform that leverages our global alumni ecosystem to support early stage startups. And we have built a network of entrepreneurs, mentors, investors, accelerators, startups, institutes to work with our startups to help them grow, to basically help them become more interesting to our corporate partners and our startups. So that's a little bit of background about us. We've got some very interesting questions from our entire network over the past few months with this changing situation of COVID. It's a new environment to work, to manage, to invest, to run a business, to start a business. And almost on an everyday basis, we're learning about this. The challenges are different, for different industries across the globe. And to basically foster debate, to support our ecosystem, to hear from global leaders, we launched this Imagine webinar series to engage with these leaders globally and to share their views with our entire network. Our first episode was around consumers. We had a really interesting discussion on how the consumer has changed in this environment and challenges organizations are facing. And in fact, out of that discussion led to this discussion where we started talking about how this environment on the one hand has supported women working from home. On the other hand, it's also challenging because children are studying at home. There are other domestic responsibilities. So how has that really turned out for working women? So I want to raise one question to all our panelists. So I'll raise the question, I'll give a brief introduction, then I'd love to hear from them. So our work and home have become more intertwined, like I said, and I'd like to hear from each of you in terms of your specific industry, your geographies. What changes have you seen for a working women? What are some of the challenges you've seen are staying the same, have been different, and what are you seeing as we move ahead? So I'd like to start with you, Lee. As an introduction, Lee Ong is a project director at Hamburg Invest, Germany. She manages acquisitions and investments from South Asia, Southeast Asia into Hamburg. She has a very diverse, experience. She was born and raised in Malaysia, graduated in UK, worked in Singapore, and now is in Hamburg. So Lee, let's start with you. Would love to get your thoughts on what you're seeing for the working women and how things are changing. Over to you.
Yes, thank you, Anju. I do see that geography shapes cultural diversity strongly. So growing up in Asia, I do see that most of the women are very educated. So everybody was being taught in the school. as we were a child that we have to be good in the school, we have to go to the universities and secure a great job. So women from Asia are very career-minded. Correct me if I'm wrong, Karina or Kori, but I do see that women really in Asia, they are really career-minded. So when you are telling people, if you are a housewife, people don't usually value caretaker as an important job. I see the differences in Germany because people acknowledge these important contributions women made to the society. And of course, there are different types of working models that women or everybody can have in Germany. So one of this is the flexibilities of working. 9 to 5, you think that working 9 to 5 considered norm usually, but these days that Germany, I mean, we have been opened up that this is a thing in the past. So even before the pandemic, people are given chances to choose this kind of flexibilities of working. My husband goes to work every morning at 6 o'clock and come back earlier so that he can spend more time at home. And I do see that apart from this flexibility of working model, that most women have also chosen to work part-time in Germany because they could have both job and also to keep their social life balance. So these days, you know, the trends also goes to the men. Divorce rates are pretty high in Germany. Some single dads would like to also spend time with their kids. So this benefits us, and it brings up a different diversities to the working workforces in Germany.
Thanks so much, Lee, for that. Karina, I'd like to move to you next. As an introduction, Karina is the CEO of WHub and the CEO, CFO of AngelHub. And she's, very passionate in the startup ecosystem. She successfully co-founded WHub and AngelHub with her partner. Together, they are on a mission to, empower startups to succeed, to drive economic wealth and economic growth. She plays many different roles. She's an ambassador, consultant, speaker, mentor, judge, and she engages with very, global events and organizations. Welcome, Karina. Would love to hear your thoughts on this.
Thank you so much. It's actually great that Lee started. So I'm originally from Germany, and when I left Germany over 20 years ago, I think it was not as flexible. So it's so great to see, that it's opened up also for opportunities for women. So I'll give you a perspective as, being here based and headquartered out of Hong Kong, okay? So not with my European background. And also I will give you a perspective as an entrepreneur myself, as Anju mentioned, but also, with AngelHub, we are the very first and only SFC regulated equity crowdfunding platform, and we have our own fund. So we do also co-invest into the deals we have. So I can also give perspective from an investor side. And as you said, WHub, our mission and passion is to help startups grow and scale. So I can also give you the perspectives really from the community as a community builder and what I can see in general. So coming back, to your question, I think first of all, what really struck me here in Hong Kong was the fact that it was a really diverse working environment, not only in terms of industry, not only in terms of background and nationalities. I'm a foreigner, but there's no issue on becoming successful in the startup scene for foreigners. Actually, 1/3 of our unicorns here are founded by foreign founders, and also in terms of female engagement in the workforce. So even before we go into startups, but even if I look into, some of the biggest financial institutions, the Hong Kong Stock Exchange, some of our banks, Standard Chartered, HSBC, CEOs, chairwomen are women. And I think one of the things, coming a little bit to what Lee was mentioning, what obviously enables that if you are a woman and also a working mom, or you have to, take care of your elderly parents, the supporting system is super important. And we're really blessed here in Hong Kong, not only that it's socially really accepted that you as a woman are part of the working force, but you also have all the supporting system with, domestic help, etc. And even right now, we're going through this pandemic. First of all, luckily, in Hong Kong, there was never any shutdown. There were those social distancing restrictions, but I have been in the office since February, also because we're organizing this big conference. Yeah, I mean, obviously the only real impact that we had was the fact that for working moms, you know, the homeschooling, so that kids were, you know, at home. But again, amazing infrastructure, amazing, you know, schools that enabled the kids to follow on at home independently. And again, so I was going to our co-working space, so I didn't even really feel that. I think your question was also a little bit, what does the startup scene really provide as an opportunity, right, for women? And very few people know that even though now we define our mission on helping startups grow and scale and therefore connect them to talent and to investors and to acceleration programs, we originally really started WHub with this mission of solving the pain point for individual talent to find different opportunities in the workforce than a typical corporate career. And very often, actually, women had issues with a typical corporate career, maybe because they needed more flexibility in working hours, working time, or, you know, working from home. Or, you know, also sometimes it was really about making an impact. I think one of the things is what I very often heard when I was working for Procter & Gamble, actually for 15 years. And particularly, you know, when you come to that point where you have maybe children or elderly care or other things, that women ask this question about why, you know, what is the impact that I'm doing in my work? And I think what our mantra is with WHub and how we help startups connect to talent and also to women talent is the fact that we tell them, tell the world your mission, your passion, and that's how you would attract people. Because particularly, you know, as a mom, I will need to make the trade-off between spending time with my kids, that is definitely valuable, I hope my kids agree, versus, you know, trying to rush to the office and, you know, contribute there. And if at that point I understand that my work that I'm delivering to the big corporate doesn't seem that meaningful, then I'm easily out. And I think startups with flat hierarchy, very large roles and responsibilities, flexibility in working hours, work location, I mean, that's really our mantra. And that's where we said, that's where actually women, I think, particularly in the startup scene, probably can thrive even better.
Thanks so much, Karina, for that. That's really interesting. And we'll get into, you know, startups in a little bit more in this discussion, because I think that's a really, you know, interesting opportunity. Kori, turn it over to you. Kori Higgins is the Senior Director for Global Development at the Stellar Development Foundation. And Kori leads the New York City office. She's an expert in technology and innovation. And you know, she works to increase inclusivity in the global financial markets. And interestingly enough, has a deep interest in the sociological implications of technological progress. She led New York City Quantitative Hedge Fund, and in a prior life, worked in US politics in Washington, DC. So a really interesting, you know, multifaceted background. So Kori, over to you. Welcome, and would love to hear from you.
Absolutely, and I'm going to continue the German theme. I was actually born in Berlin. Looks like we've got a nice German, right?
Interesting.
Yeah, so I currently sit in New York City. So we're a San Francisco-based foundation, but I lead the New York office. So this is going to be a pretty American and New York centric approach here, and the perspective that I have to bring to this. And I think, you know, in New York, you're really seeing the confluence of so many different sectors and how they're each dealing with COVID has been really interesting to see kind of in that kind of response. Working in blockchain, you know, our raison d'etre is really in distributed systems. So a fully remote workforce, or that transition, was particularly easy for us. I'm sure you know, the other panelists can know that in technology and in startups, this was a much, I think, smoother transition than for some other legacy industries. What I'm really seeing is that technology, and really it's driving home the point that technology really is turning out to be a force for inclusion, both from an industry perspective, but even from a hardware perspective, looking at like culture as well as infrastructure outside of the sector. So what I'm really seeing, especially in New York, is a lot of the struggle is really coming from more of the legacy industries. finance, et cetera. And again, from an infrastructure perspective, I know a few of the larger banks, for example, just don't have the technological infrastructure to support such a large remote workforce, which is forcing people back in the office earlier than they otherwise would be. And I know that's causing a lot of stress. So I think coming from tech, startups, innovation, we're in a really privileged position here to be able to make that transition. And I think what I'm seeing in New York also is that can really create a huge imbalance. I think, kind of echoing what Karina was saying, having a support structure for things like childcare, for elder care is so important with inclusivity, and especially during a health crisis. And so there's an imbalance, for example, when your legacy bank wants you to come back to work, but New York City childcare schools aren't open. So we don't have the same kind of legacy and culture, I think, of a lot of support systems within networks within the community. So that's causing, I think, a lot of women an incredible amount of stress in terms of having to make really hard decisions. So I think that these are all good things for the tech sector, because I think it'll really show that if you really want to attract and retain the best talent, you need, large legacy industries are going to need to change. And I think, and I also just echoing, I think, Karina, what you said as well about elder care. That's a huge topic here. And I think when you see the devastating numbers in the States of nursing home mortality, it's something like 12% in New Jersey, 6% in New York City. These are huge numbers. I think there's even more pressure on women for whom that work has traditionally fallen. So what I'm seeing is a lot of policies that have come out from some of the tech leaders, the US tech leaders, and even more legacy industries. A lot of them don't really have a particular gender perspective or lens, but we are seeing huge shifts in a lot of the dynamics at play, in the workday. And I think a lot of industries, again, are realizing that they're going to have to divorce themselves from the expectation of 9-to-5 work to allow them to retain and attract the best talent, many of whom are women and who can take care of their kid during the day. And when your child's down for a nap, you can log on, or you're taking care of your parents. You have such a dynamic life, and maybe you get to work at 8 o'clock in the evening, but it doesn't mean you're less of a productive member of a team. And I think, we're also seeing a lot of, because of how expensive cities like New York City or San Francisco are, we're seeing a lot of companies allowing, employees to move out to the country. So we're seeing massive shifts in how population centers are changing in the US. Which is also, I think, allows for a more sustainable domestic life in a lot of ways, because you're able to maybe move closer to family who might not live in a high rise in San Francisco, so you're seeing a lot of those changes. So I'm really interested. I'm really excited to see both how this can be a real moment for inclusion and support, and how this is really going to force legacy industries to change their basic infrastructure and culture if they want to compete with more technologically forward companies and organizations.
Very interesting. Thanks for that, Kori. I'd like to now also welcome our last panelist, Ms. Ruchira Shukla, who's going to give us a really good perspective from the Indian aspect. As an introduction, Ruchira has been the regional lead for IFC's Disruptive Technologies and Venture Capital Funds business in Southeast Asia. And she's been overseeing investments in technology startups across different stages, investments in VC funds. She's led investments across a range of sectors, consumer, internet, B2B, e-commerce. And she's active as a board member on a number of startup boards and represents IFCs on the boards of a number of startups. She has over 25 years experience across venture capital and private equity investment banking. So welcome, Ruchira. Glad to have you on the panel. I'd love to hear, it's interesting to see, there are lots of similarities, geographically, but, there are also some common threads. What have you been seeing, from the Indian perspective in terms of, the working women and the work from home and, some of the impacts and challenges?
Thank you, Anju. Can you hear me okay?
Yes, we can hear you.
Wonderful. So yeah, as you said, there are common themes and common threads across different industries as well as different geographies on how we deal with gender and the challenges that women face in general in keeping up with the work required in their offices as well as that required at home for childcare, elder care, and the like. But that's also been multiplied several fold in the current crisis that we're in. with COVID, with the fact that your family could be at risk, with the fact that somebody could be ill in your family or extended family. And in cultures like India, you can't ignore that. You need to attend to that and provide the support that you may, and while also ensuring the safety and security of your own immediate family. As you said, my work involves direct investments in startups, board level involvement in startups, VC fund investments, and active participation in the LP advisory committee of funds, all of which used to be extremely involving in terms of travel. And for me, what I'm seeing in this world is it's a huge respite that nobody expects me to jump on a plane at the drop of a hat. Which, I used to be in Bangalore every third week or Mumbai, and I'm like, thank God I didn't have to explain to people why this can be done remotely, because people now, this is a new norm. And people are doing board meetings through WebEx. They are doing entire fundraisers through phone calls and Zoom calls and Skype calls and WebEx. And I think that's important. That's an important shift in our industry, because it makes this whole airport time and airline time and aircraft time go away.
Yeah.
And to me, that is a huge, huge welcome change. We do, I do participate a lot in conferences. I speak on panels, and even that, to speak for a 1 hour panel, you spend time traveling to the space, staying in a hotel room, which is time away from family. The fact that I can now do it in a 1 hour webinar is a lot better. So, COVID, despite all its challenges, I think has brought some respite to women who had to be on the road a lot, and I was one of those. And being also in India, I think I have both the pros and the cons of that. The benefits of that is in our society, as you probably well know, Anju, is we get a lot of live-in help.
Yeah.
So I'm lucky to have a live-in cook who didn't disappear when COVID happened, right? I have nannies who can come in and who can stay with me for an extended period of time. And I have my parents living with me, and my mom's the reason why I can stay locked away in my office from all day while while my son is taken care of by her. So I think that kind of support we're lucky to have. On the other hand, being in India, there are societal expectations. So, when my in-laws visit, I still feel mildly apologetic if I'm still in my office. To say, oh, sorry, I have this call. Oh, I still have to finish this before I can go and say hello to them. So that for a woman is not taken for granted. Whereas if a guy was stuck in his office in the evening, that would be totally understandable. So that's just India's culture. But I also think it allows us to make that statement. Now that we are in COVID times, and by the way, I have realized that there is no 9 to 5 in my job. It's actually, I crawl into my office in my pajamas in the morning, and I'm here sometimes till 10 p.m. The only reason I'm not in my pajamas today is because of your webinar. I was amused to see this recent post that came around. Working from home makes me look more homeless, right? Even brush my hair. But that's what happens when you get, fortunately for me, I have an office that's far away from the rest of my house. So I can come into my office and seclude myself. But it has told me that actually there's no break time. Like the commute time is now, I miss it because I used to dial down. Now I get in until, and by the way, I also work a lot with the US. So I keep working till about 10 p.m. India time. So that unfortunately is the bad side, while doing away with the travel is the good thing. I think making the statement to our society that women can say, hey, I'm at work, I cannot do this. And for the family, extended family, in-laws to accept it is a statement. It's also a statement work-wise, where I can, if my son walks into my office while I'm in a conference call, I can pull him up and show him on the WebEx, and nobody thinks much about it. He has attended so many of my calls, and he knows. And that's just the new normal. You are with your family, you can't turn them away all the time. And so they'll be around you. And people will learn to accept that, which will give us a lot more.
Absolutely. Really nice. I mean, really interesting perspectives. And I think we can all really relate to them. So Lee, you come from a similar, geography, you worked in both. I know we've talked about, acceptance in, Europe now. How do you see kind of the workforce dealing with this change, some of the changes that, Kori's also talked about, Ruchira has talked about in terms of how women are working. Do you think that's impacting, their productivity, or, how they're being viewed by their peers in terms of, their work culture? What's your perspective?
Yes, I do see that it's a really great challenge for women to work at home, to be at home, because the normal norm of the women as a caregiver has been changed because the men are working at home at the same time. And I do see that men can be a model as well, because the role of men is also as important these days. I love friends, and I usually have lots of visits, and people are wondering, they're quite impressed with my husband than by me, myself. So sometimes I think because he's doing a lot of things that men are not doing. So, my husband is even more feminism than me, I must say, because he motivates our kids to do housework and tells them that, all those housework at home is not mom's job. So you have to share the jobs because we are all living under one roof. So that works out pretty well. And I do see that this is a time for all of us to restructure and also to reflect, to do some reflections, what works out well for us.
Kori, you mentioned technology on the one side, obviously it's more of an enabler, but you're also mentioning these legacy, industries are, having a hard time. Are you seeing more or less women, coming into the workforce now? Is technology enabling them more, and are these legacy industries more accepting of women joining now?
From what I've seen, I think generally there has been a shift towards being more open for women joining it. But the way I look at it now is, I think you're really going to see a drop off in a lot of the legacy industries where women might go more towards technology because of being more allowing for certain kinds of lifestyles. It's like, I'm thinking of some women I know who, again, working for like some big legacy banks and really don't want to have to go into work again if they are having to also, they don't have any childcare option. So, maybe they're looking at changing jobs and going more into technology, so I think that you are going to see that shift, and where legacy companies, I think, really had tried to do some change policies, become more open. And I think a lot of them, I think one interesting thing that more legacy industries, government, et cetera, had been trying to do to make it easier for women is also do things like more things around paternity leave, making it easier for men to take time off to go watch their kids' football game. Because once you normalize things and you take it away from just women's activities, and it's more about being a parent, I think you see a little bit more across the board inclusion. But those are slow changes, right? I mean, those are slow. And then technology, as we know, it has a long way to go when it comes to gender parity. But I think the kinds of inclusion it's allowing for, I think, we'll see over the course of the next year, especially in the US, I think will take women from more legacy industries into technology. I would think that's what I see, at least.
Interesting. So, Karina and Ruchira, same question for both of you in terms of startups. I know in India, we've been trying to encourage more women to get into startups, and Karina, you also, since you work with them, you know it. How do you see any changes, positive or negative, in terms of how many women are now considering, startups as kind of an opportunity? Do you see any change? Do you see it easier, harder, for women entrepreneurs now than it was earlier?
Yeah, thank you. I'm not sure if I should go first, Ruchira.
Go for it.
Okay, sure. Before I go to that question, I just wanted to totally echo what all of my co-panelists mentioned, that some of these behaviors are really here to stay. And I was just laughing, Ruchira, when you mentioned about like webinars becoming normal and your kid walks in, and I think we all remember the BBC reporter, right, who got viral because the kid was walking in and he was like, he didn't know how to manage it. I think we as women were kind of like, better positioned to manage such type of situations. And as you said, I mean, now it's just accepted, right? And it's interesting because some of these things were maybe before you had like a competitive disadvantage because you couldn't travel. Now nobody travels. So now it's okay to say, I'm not going to travel, but I can still be effective because I can call in, right? Yeah. So again, I fully, that's a great advantage. Now coming back to your specific question, right? the funny thing, what I have seen here in Hong Kong, it was not necessarily gender specific. The fact that a lot of talent was not necessarily considering startups as an opportunity really to be active in the workforce. Maybe just because switching costs were too high, jobs were too well paid, and careers were too stable. What we can see now, again, in general, the fact that you don't have any such as a stable corporate career, or like a plain out corporate career where, like if I look back at my dad, he entered, John Deere, and he retired with John Deere, right? So I think, and I think the way it was also really, really nicely described was actually Sheryl Sandberg, right? When she said that careers now are not necessarily that the ladder anymore, it's more like the jungle gym, and, you may, once scale a little bit back in terms of responsibility or scope, but then just to bounce back off, or you make a change really to your career path. And I think, coming a little bit back to what I said before, where it resonates maybe more with women is the fact that I always feel we're really, really guided by this question about, why am I doing this? And again, because probably the alternative is so crucial and important, being the center of a household, maybe for children, maybe for your parents, maybe for the communities. I mean, the number of women that are involved in charities, right? And you would always benchmark your work and the impact that you have versus what is the alternative that you can do. And there, I mean, I'm very idealistic, and there's not only the good, there's also the bad and the ugly, right, in the startup scene. But I feel that women really, really appreciate that, they can restart a new career by being 30 or 40. And typically in the old career paths, where like you had to give everything until you're 35. And if you didn't make it at least to associate director or director by 35, then, well, you were always stuck at that, lower middle management level, because again, careers used to be linear and linear in a certain time frame. And so you were just out of the pool if you didn't hit a certain milestone. And if you said you wanted to have kids, for example, or you had to take care of your dad at that point in time, then you were out of the pool. And I think that's an opportunity that a lot of, people in general, but maybe women even more, sees now this opportunity. I can enter into the startup scene, and obviously the smaller the team, I'll just need a brain and passion, and then I can contribute, right? Obviously, the more you scale and the bigger the companies get, again, then it's more structured by expertise or so, and you get hired for maybe having had 20 years of experience as a compliance officer. But again, a lot of opportunities are really, and a lot of, business models are just super new, and people, there is nothing such as a person who has 5 or 10 years experience in a certain industry. And that's where women then can come in, step in, and really find it super satisfying, because the impact they have is really big. So also now in Hong Kong, it's great. I mean, we have our success cases. We have, 9 to 10 unicorns here for 7 million people. I think that puts us kind of like the highest density per unicorn per capita, which is pretty cool. So with also these success stories, right? I mean, we have more and more talent in general, but also female talent becoming active.
Nice. Ruchira, your thoughts?
So I would echo that there is actually more of an opportunity for women to enter the startup space right now. And it goes back to some of the mechanics of how we work changing, right? The fact that everyone is working from home. Everyone is minimizing travel. So, if people said, oh, doing a startup is very, very difficult, but because it will mean you'll work long hours, you'll be on the road, all of that is changing because people can do things remotely, and therefore pursuing a new business, building a new business has become just as difficult or as hard as it was to take up a job. So therefore, women who put that away because they said, oh, the startup will be tough, are now being able to attempt it. The other thing is, the one disadvantage that women had was the lack of strong networks, lack of productive networks, because they felt, oh, I don't have the extra time and energy to go get a drink with someone that another male counterpart can, and that allows him to get funding or whatever. I think the fact that we're all at home working from our screens has created a level playing field for everybody. It's not about that drink in the bar that clenches the teeth. It's about how smart you sound when you're presenting your case. And I think that also is allowing women to take a bet on their goals and their dreams. The other thing I've realized is in a crisis, investors have become very, very discerning. They're not going after, oh, the swagger or the sound or the old boys network. They're thinking about, are you able to build a real business? And it's very hard to build a real business in normal circumstances. It's doubly harder if the world is facing a pandemic and about to move into a recession. So in that environment, whether man or woman, one will really have to work hard to put the pieces together to build a startup. The quick and easy deals will not come, which means it goes down to true merit. It goes down to true drive and true passion. And the easy stuff that worked sometimes for men to the disadvantage of women will not work anymore. The other thing I'd like to say is a little bit of drawing a parallel from our personal lives, right? I think women bring a lot of strength and fortitude, which is a skill set that often doesn't get appreciated in the corporate setting. But it's an extremely valued trait in a startup. And to draw the parallel to our personal lives, I'll put it this way, right? Like my husband is very popular with my son. So sometimes my family will say, he loves Papa. And I am very secure because I know that when things go wrong, everybody has to step aside and it's only Mama who can fix it, right? And so women are needed and are the only point of solution when things go wrong. And I see that in the startups where I'm sitting on boards, right? COVID has hit, revenues are down. Women who are at the back of the room are stepping into the front of the room, taking charge, stepping up and fixing things. And the men are stepping away to create that space for them. Because they realize that when things go wrong, you need a level-headed person with strength, fortitude, determination to help out. So there is a lot more of front seat participation that women are seeing now in the startup world that may not have been available to them in the past.
Interesting. So let me start by a question that's coming. So you mentioned, we've talked about kind of the startup ecosystem and level playing field, and throughout the world, we've talked about in a typical situation, women take time off, they have kids and then they want to come back and it's hard to come into the workforce. What are you seeing? Do you think now, because of this remote work from home, it's easier for women to get back into the workforce? Are companies hiring more? Is this actually creating more of an opportunity for women? Now they can actually get back sooner, work part-time maybe, versus going back full-time. Are you seeing some of that happening in the traditional industry?
Well, from my perspective, okay, sorry, go ahead.
So I was just wanted to throw something in there where I just wanted to point out, I know in the States, at least, we have 56 million Americans who consider themselves part of the gig economy. And I think that as we're going to see that increase again over time, especially with women who are in their 20s, 30s, et cetera. So that's going to, I think I don't know if you're going to see the same kind of, leaving on maternity leave or whatnot, staying home for 5 years and then re-entering, and those really clear barriers. I would not be surprised if what we're going to see is more women going towards a gig economy model of taking on fewer projects and then ramping up. So it's going to be something a little bit more dynamic and a little bit smoother, rather than having the traditional relationship with work and with employment. That's a sector that I know in the U.S. is really, really increasing very fast, and seems to marry very nicely with a lot of how women have traditionally looked at their relationship to work and home life. There's some downsides to that, of course, too, where especially in the U.S. that also means breaks in things like healthcare or different kinds of support networks that you see from an infrastructure basis. But just from a pure work perspective, I think you're going to see a lot of women taking advantage of the flexibility that has, and not turning off their career and turning it back on. Turning the volume down.
Interesting. Ruchira, you were saying?
Yeah, I would, a similar concept, maybe different way of looking at the same thing. I think people will become more task focused rather than time focused. So it's not about you get into your office at 9, you complete 8 hours of your day and go home. You're sort of, as we were saying earlier, you're sort of there in the office anyway, and you will be responsible for completing the task assigned, for the project assigned, and you do it on your own time. You could do it at 6 in the morning, you could do it 2 at night, depending on when the demands on your other fronts pick up or go down. the ebb and flow can be managed alongside the ebb and flow of your demands on the other fronts so that you can deliver. And so it will be task focused, it will be more result focused rather than time, which I think is a huge change forward. So people will do away with face time because there's only that much face time you can have on a screen with someone. I think that will be a welcome change for the future.
Awesome. Just shifting gears a little bit. I mean, Karina, you talked about kind of investments. One of the questions that has come in from Manoj is, do you see, more or less international deals happening with startups in India? Do you see a change in the norm in terms of M&As, deal structuring, funding, as we start moving, well, hopefully towards, the latter end of this COVID era?
Yeah, so I mean, I'm happy to answer. I mean, I think from my positioning, so where we help companies scale in Asia through Hong Kong, Greater Bay Area. I mean, we personally are looking to invest into companies that are scaling outside their home markets and really help them, give them a competitive edge with our network here, in particular also with bringing more local investors here. So we would rather not going into India, but kind of like companies that are ready to scale outside of India, really accompany them with soft landing and finding investors here. But I mean, just looking into some of our partners and colleagues, and for example SOSV and China, etc., they are very, very active. So you have a couple of also international VCs that are really specializing, and I think what I would say is true for the Indian market is very true for the Chinese market as well, and arguably for a lot of markets where you really it takes specific know-how and understanding and penetration of the market. If you are, and again, it really obviously depends on the stage, but if you're going into India at an early stage to invest into Indian companies that first want to scale in India, right? So, and again, I think what is really nice to see, at least what we can see, that you have more companies that are specializing, or more, VCs and investors that are specializing then in that, because again, I mean, it's another, 1.3 billion, population, with, obviously very complex because it's just one huge big market, very, very different regions, over 40 or 50 different languages, etc. But so, yes, I think if the question was how COVID is really influencing, startup investing, again, I think it really obviously depends on the stage. I would argue the earlier the stage, the more, again, the team is important, right? You're investing into the team more than the business model. And arguably, a crisis like that is a blessing in disguise, because if you really want to assess resilience and agility and the capacity of founders to manage, through tough times, it's the best time to assess that. Right, and their ability not only to seize top-line opportunities, how they shift and adapt their business model to take advantage of some of these behavior change we're talking about. I mean, for example, right now, we're having a gaming company, and I mean, from them, they're saying, "Oh my God, this is a blessing in disguise," because for us now, every day is a weekend. Everybody's behind their computers, everybody's investing. And then obviously it's interesting to assess, are these, changes in consumer behavior that are here to stay or just temporary? And again, how do companies, look, or another company that we have in more the lifestyle sector that used to be more like an offline lifestyle play, they were able to fully transition online. But also from a bottom line perspective, so are the founders capable on making the tough decisions? I mean, I always say, what is really unfortunate with a crisis such as COVID, maybe, business wise and top line wise, tech startups are maybe better equipped. But at the other side, 80-90% of your P&L are salaries, right? So if you really need to start cutting costs, you don't have a lot of CapEx or marketing budget you can cut. You need to cut into the people. So so that's maybe a very long answer, but I'm sure there's some maybe also Ruchira or Kori, right, that have a more specific like Indian angle, because there was part of the question was really particular for the Indian market.
So I think that also gels very well to what Ruchira said, initially in terms of, this is a real test, now it's really quality that's coming to the forefront, and people are really taking more of a laser eye at that. So it's really, bringing out the best. It makes it harder, but I think now this is when the cream will really like flow to the top. Next question, let me kind of, pose it to you, Lee, and then I'd love to hear other feedback. Are you seeing, anything that companies are doing differently to support kind of women working from home or to bring in, more women in the workforce? Because, people have, like you said, left the workforce in the past, because they were taking care of families. This wasn't an opportunity. Are companies doing anything to attract that workforce back to them now, knowing they had good people, that now is an opportunity for them to work?
Oh, yes, I can speak that for our organizations. And we have, I'm quite blessed because they have been really, really tolerant. And we have given lots of opportunities and lots of choices how we can work, how we would like to work. So they listen to us, so which is make sense. And also we are, since today, the 1st of July, we are being asked to go back to work. Totally. Yes, but I'm still at home because I say I have 2 kids to take care of, this is why I have to be at home. And currently we are all looking at more working at home as an option, not even to women, also to men. As I just heard from the news yesterday also that the Federal Ministers of Labor in Germany is now also having the discussions about reinforcing the new law regarding the rights of working at home for women, for everybody. So it's going to be something new and everybody will accept working at home. But as an employer, then you have to trust your employer. Are they doing enough job? Are they doing good job? And as an employer, I would say that how secure is my job actually? If I would be sent to the short-term work, in Germany, we have this kind of short-term work. I'm sure that Kori or Karena, knows that. Lots of industries like, from hotels and all those things, they have sent their workers into these short-time jobs. Okay. So this is the things that we have to see.
Any other thoughts on what, organizations you're aware of are doing to kind of encourage, maybe more women joining the workforce in this current situation?
Anju,
yeah, I would say that.
Go ahead.
Sorry, I have one more things to add. Talking about the startups situations, and I was quite shocked to hear about the number yesterday on one of these webinars from the Minister of Economy and Energy, Britta Zivers. She has given us the numbers of the startup founders. So 69% are purely men group, and 20% are mixtures of women and men, and only 11% are all female. So how can we change this? How can we encourage more women into the startup scene? I think that startup is forming a startup is easy, but how can you make it work? And it is an enormous job. It's not a 9-to-5 job. Yeah. You have to spend weekends on meetings, on doing your fundings and putting up your strategies. So it is really, really not easy for women to go into this startup scene, I would say. And also, I think also the lack of the females into programming. So I am quite happy to see that in Berlin that Julia Fronderbeck has actually organized something which is very meaningful during the weekend for teenagers to learn how to do codings, to get them motivated in the jobs themselves, And at the same time, I see the German system is also very good, that we do have these boys' days and girls' days during the school time, because you have to start early, that you get boys to have a look of mainly women domain industries, like characters in the kindergarten, or like getting the women also into the technical jobs, so they can have a feeling what I can do when I'm growing up.
Nice.
want to just mention something here too. I know for the States, a lot of the things that I've seen, to your question, I haven't really seen too many gender specific initiatives or any kind of responses that has been on those lines. I've seen things like saying, Amazon's giving everybody $1,000 to set up their workspace to work from home if you're working for corporate, things like that, but not really with a gender lens. But I know in the US, it's like the hiring has been really rough recently. It's been, we've had like 70,000 tech layoffs. So I feel like I have not heard a lot about companies trying to get more women in, simply also because they're just not hiring. It's been a rough environment there. But I think that what we can see in that new change though, is a lot of women lifting each other up with that 70,000, those 70,000 tech layoffs. It's really taking the stigma away from being unemployed. I think women are natural community builders, and you're seeing some wonderful resources being built to support each other and to look for opportunities and to, do networking. And it's actually been really lovely to see. I haven't really witnessed this before, and the kinds of opportunities, the kinds of networks, the kind of infrastructure that are being built. And a lot of those are doing a lot to lift up women. So I think when we start, as a nation, hiring again, I think you're going to see a lot of really talented women in greater numbers entering the workforce from that, because of a lot of the infrastructure that's being built right now to support them. It's actually really lovely to see, I think, how people support each other. Yeah, and a lot of
that's great. Ruchira?
Yes, I was just going to add in terms of specific initiatives that we have seen and we have ourselves considered supporting is when this whole COVID thing hit and people started working from home, the biggest challenge that people said was with kids not being able to go to school since schools are shut, women had to do homeschooling while also being on their conference calls, while also completing their work as part of their job. And so what we tried to help people with was online platforms for online education. In a manner where kids could stay engaged, and it only works for obviously kids of a particular age and above, where if the institution or the organization signed up for these online platforms, there would be a way for the kids to be studying in a corner while the mother continues to do what she has to do for her work. So that was one thing we have seen people just make available for their employees as a resource. Here's a list of online platforms with various kinds of education, curriculum, math, science, whatever is needed by grade, and allowing or enabling this signing up of it, maybe in some cases even subsidizing it. The other thing we do to bring more women into the startup ecosystem is to support accelerators that are in turn helping women. So we have a program by which we've identified a bunch of accelerators, and if the graduating group of that accelerator includes women-owned startups, and if they can successfully find funding for those women-owned startups, we give a small bonus to the accelerator for every such funding. Basically what happens, because what happens is at the onset, when teams are entering an acceleration program, they are gender balanced. But when they graduate from an accelerator program, the probability of a male-led team finding funding is higher than that of a female-led team. And if you look at those numbers, you'll find a very small percentage of women-led team actually end up getting funding. So that is why we've put in place this incentive structure where we're telling accelerators, if you can successfully get your graduating a startup with a woman founder to find funding, we give you a bonus as IFC. So that's another initiative we've launched.
That's awesome. I see a lot of nodding heads on the panelists. So that sounds awesome. That sounds like a really kind of good idea.
I just want to add in something, Anju. It was quite interesting to know that we have one startups in Berlin. They are doing great stuff, in terms of balance up startup founders to get fundings between the genders differences. So they do matchmaking. So if you're looking for co-founders and women, then you can look for it. So this is really great things that it encourage more women.
Nice. I'm conscious of the time, so I'll ask one more question that has come from Uma. For a bootstrap startups, in terms of, controlling your payroll expenses and getting good output, how would you consider kind of startups encouraging women gig workers? I'm assuming, maybe part-time workers, and getting startups to leverage kind of more women working, from home? What could startups be doing to kind of bring more women, even if they're doing part-time, help control their costs, but also get some really, really good talent?
So my thought on that, Anju, very quickly is because of the last few months of lockdowns that we've had, a lot of startups have had to lay off people.
Yes.
But we are very optimistic that this is not going to be completely sort of in lockdown mode going forward. Lockdowns have started easing up, businesses coming back. As the pressure of the initial few months dissipates a bit and businesses continue to start building up scale again, you will need to hire. And what I would say to startups now is, as you build your workforce back, do that in as flexible as a manner as possible. Instead of hiring for certain roles, hire for certain projects. And that's when you can bring women as gig workers working from home. It allows the company to have a very flexible cost structure, because when the project is over, the gig is over and your cost goes back down. And so this time round, do not incur a very fat fixed cost base.
Makes a lot of sense. So I'd like to give kind of our panelists, just a couple of minutes to share any parting thoughts on, what they see as, what women should be taking more of an advantage of these days. What are opportunities, you think they should be capitalizing on? What you'd like to see either from the company or the home that could be done more to support working women. I mean, Karena, I'll start with you.
Yeah, thank you. I think one of the things that I just wanted to add is, even though, I said, like, even in Hong Kong, we're really super diverse. I think in general, when we see that we have, in the tech scene, we still see that we're not yet really fairly represented, and very often, I'm very active actually at school, and I remember at one point in time, the middle school principal talking to me and said, Karena, can you not come in and give a talk? And we have like a coding class, and 20 spaces, and 19 filled up straight away with guys signing, with boys signing up, and only one girl. And I said, what, actually, I remember I said, Paul, your middle school is too late. And I think one of the things that I think that really also parents should be very, very aware of, because at the very often at the beginning, it's really also an educational and mindset thing, where we say, asking girls to become digital literate, right, to be interested, is really, really important. And again, we should not confuse that, having your daughter learn how to code means that she ends up, with a hoodie eating pizza and becomes like a super geek. It's just that it's like the same thing when you learn a language, right? I mean, everybody has to learn English, I guess, at school, let's say a foreign language, but not everybody becomes a dolmetscher or interpreter. And it's exactly the same thing. And that's what parents need to understand, even for me, I'm actually the low tech part of the company. So my co-founder, Karen, she's an engineer, right? But just enable to be possible to understand and to even, manage a tech team, you do need to understand what you don't understand. And therefore you need really a basic, level of digital literacy. And that is, I think, something really important. And when I see in some sectors, like in fintech, where you take the problem of financial services having, historically being male dominated, plus technology having been historically male dominated, and you cross them, it becomes even worse, right? So I think that is looking forward, something that we really try to encourage. And sometimes it's such a mindset shift. And I think things like Roblox, etc., really help, because seriously, because, even gaming, it used to be, killing and fighting and maybe playing soccer. And now, I see my youngest daughter, finding her super dress and Roblox, and then what is she
It's
playing?
amazing you should say that. My daughter is exactly the same. I was so surprised. So she's totally into that.
Right, like Royal High, right? I mean, amazing. It's like, God, lower the barriers. I think that is something kind of like looking forward. I think is really still necessary.
Very nice, awesome. Lee, how about you? Parting thoughts?
Yes, I do see the same, that we have to start early, and this is why that I'm very happy with the school systems here, that they do encourage girls, to do codings at their free times. Of course, there are so many choices of things to do during your free time, but those are, how to motivate them to go into these sectors, to be interested in science, coding, mathematics. Those are really, really important stuff. And at the same time, I do see that, that going back to work, companies can do quite a lot too. So changes of policies, like we have been given choices to do full-time or part-time, and also in a hybrid situation. So you can do half of being present at work and half to being at home. So the possibilities are all opening up.
Awesome. Kori, let's go to you. Would love to hear your thoughts.
Sure. So I sort of really echo, I think Ruchira was saying earlier in the call that, we really do have a moment of having equal playing field, and it's about as equal as a playing field as we're going to get. And I don't know how long this will last. So I think, if you're female, like, this is really a great opportunity to take advantage of that. Look for speaking opportunities, develop virtual networks. If you've had a dream to start a business, this is the time. And I think, also for legacy industries, right? If you insist on doing business the old way, you're going to lose your talent. And, and I think also another thing I was thinking about as we were thinking through this and talking about this has been a great discussion, is, that it's a really fun exercise to kind of taking a step farther, to think about what are ways to structure the workplace to be as inclusive as possible, given this new world. Because, we can't, I think we can't assume that gender dynamics are going to change completely, especially if people are home. Women still do most of the domestic labor. And a lot of women aren't as lucky as, like, Lee is, for example, having a great partner. Wonderful. So, I know there was like the classic trope of, like, San Francisco tech company having like a gym and a dry cleaner and, like, and like, maybe we talk about what it would be like if the cream of the crop tech companies had things like credits towards a housekeeper coming once a week, or food delivery, so you don't have to deal with dinner, or certain ways that kind of acknowledge the gender disparity in those dynamics and can still be supportive to really attract the best female talent. So I think this is a really huge opportunity, and it's a fun and inspiring time. So I'm feeling very positive about it. So it's been a great discussion.
Awesome. Ruchira?
Yes, so I'll build on that as well. As I was saying earlier, times have changed. And, I was talking about the fact that we don't have to travel anymore. And, one such travel that I was doing amongst my millions of flights between Bombay and Delhi and Bangalore, somebody sitting next to me who happened to be working for another venture fund was talking about a guy said he loved traveling. And I was thinking, you must be crazy, because I hate it. I do it because I have to. And, but, oh yeah, I get away from my wife and kids and I love it. I said, no, I want to be home. I want to be with my family. So the fact that now, guess what? You're not at a disadvantage. Nobody's traveling. The other thing that's changed is no physical presence is required, which at some point women feel, oh, in this room of 10 men, I'm the only woman. Now everybody's on a screen. I used to feel that as well. Sometimes I'm a petite person, and I walked into a meeting with somebody who was 6 feet 8 inches, and I thought, oh my God, I'm not even visible. But I'm happy to report that I haven't worn heels for the last 4 months. And I'm so happy about it, right? So things have changed to my advantage. I can be very effective without my heels because I'm behind a screen. And so that's one thing, that things have changed, make you take advantage of the situation. The other thing is play up your difference. That's my message. And actually it came from an executive coach who I very much respect. Figure out what's different about you in any setting and play that up, because that's what makes people notice you. So if it's an all-male board meeting, guess what? Somebody else's comment may not be remembered because it's like, one of the guys said it. But if you are confident and you lean in and you make your remark, people will remember it because it comes from a different sort of, just a different sort of voice, a different person, then everybody else gets lost in the crowd, you stand out. So I think in today's world, women, by being outnumbered, can actually stand out. They should thrive in their difference and play up their difference. And lastly, from a very tactical standpoint, the point about STEM education and coding has been made. I would say women should embrace math. I think in my career, and I was an engineering grad and MBA in finance, and I thought the fact that I understood math and finance and accounting put me in such a strong position as an investor, as an investment banker, and even for those who want to build startups. You need to know the numbers.
Yeah.
So I would encourage women to embrace the numbers and be comfortable in that.
No, I totally agree. I mean, I think some really, really interesting, good points, about it being a level field. Women have never had, such an opportunity as it is before. This is the time to really get, I love that comment about getting your young girls into coding and maths and just getting them more comfortable with it. I know now with a lot more, online teaching opportunities coming up and a lot of new, online, startups are doing a lot of more stuff. I think it's really an interesting time. And I think this is a great opportunity. And, thank you to all our panelists, Karina, Lee, Kori, Ruchira, especially for a few of you that I know it's really late your time, so really appreciate it. But it's been an awesome discussion. Thank you so much for sharing your thoughts. I couldn't get to all the questions, so I will share them with you later. Would love to kind of get your thoughts so I can share it out back with our network. I'd love to continue kind of these discussions, but thank you to all our attendees and thank you to all our panelists. Great feedback. Feel free to share any more thoughts with us, and stay tuned for our next session, which will probably happen in a couple of weeks. Thank you all. Good evening.
Thank
you so much,
Thank
Anju.
you.
Thank you for being such a great moderator. Thank you. And
Thanks
thanks
so
to my
much.
co-panelists. I learned so much from you guys.
Thank you. Very nice.
Thank you,
meeting guys.
everybody. Bye.
Bye.
Bye-bye.